Have you ever read something that just seems to completely contradict itself? Well, deep inside the Quran, there's a puzzle like that, one that has had scholars debating for centuries. On one hand, you have a message of peace. On the other, a command to fight. How can both possibly exist in the same scripture? Let's see if we can unravel this. So the puzzle really starts right here with this verse from the 9th chapter, At-Tawbah. A common translation reads, "O you who have believed, fight those adjacent to you of the disbelievers." Now, on the surface, that sounds like a very direct, very challenging command. And here's where it gets really tricky. You have that verse, which seems to be a clear call to fight people labeled disbelievers. But then, in another part of the Quran, you have this crystal clear statement, "There shall be no compulsion in religion." So, how can both be true? They seem totally at odds. And that tension has opened the door to some very different and sometimes very dangerous ways of thinking. To really get why this is so important, we first have to look at how people have traditionally tried to solve this puzzle and, why those answers sometimes just don't quite work. Okay, so there are three main explanations you'll usually hear. The first is called abrogation. It's the idea that newer verses in the Quran can actually cancel out older, more peaceful ones. The second is all about historical context, saying, oh, that command was only for one specific battle way back when. And the third is the state of emergency idea, that these verses only activate, so to speak, during an official war. But here's where things get really serious. Some extremist groups take that idea of abrogation to the absolute extreme. They claim that this one verse about fighting cancels out all the verses about peace, creating this terrifying mandate for a permanent war against anyone who thinks differently. And that interpretation becomes the justification they use to legitimize violence and terrorism. So you can see, this is a major dilemma. But what if we've been looking for the answer in all the wrong places? What if the key isn't buried in some complex theological debate, but it's been hiding in plain sight the whole time, just in the actual words themselves? And this brings us to a totally fresh perspective. It's a powerful linguistic analysis, championed by thinkers like Dr. Khalid al-Sayed Hassan. The whole solution is based on one simple idea. Let's go back and look at what these core Arabic words really mean. Let's start with a huge one, the word Iman. Now, almost everywhere it's translated as faith or belief, something you hold inside your head. But the linguistic root of Iman is Aman, which means security. So this analysis argues that Iman isn't a passive belief. It's an action. It is the act of granting security to other people. And that connects perfectly to the word Islam. Its root is salam, which means peace. So following that same logic, Islam isn't just a noun, a label you wear. It's the active process of granting peace to others. Are you seeing the pattern here? These terms aren't about private thoughts. They're about public actions. This completely changes who we're talking about in this puzzle. The mu'min is no longer just a believer, but as someone who grants security. And that means the kafir, usually translated as disbeliever, is their direct opposite. In this context, there's someone who denies security and threatens people. The whole focus just shifts from what's in your head to what you do in the world. All right, so now that we're armed with this linguistic key, let's go back to that original verse and see what happens. It's pretty amazing. Okay, here's that verse again, but let's try reading it with your original root meanings. Instead of a call to believers, it's a call to those who grant security. And the command isn't to fight disbelievers, but to combat those who deny security. The difference is just night and day. The common reading sounds like a call for religious war. "O believers, fight the neighboring disbelievers." But the linguistic reading is a call for civic defense. "O granters of security, combat those neighboring you who deny security." And just like that, the contradiction, it's gone. It just vanishes. Because suddenly, the conflict isn't about what someone believes in their heart and soul. It's about how they behave in society. The problem isn't their faith, it's their actions. Actions that threaten the peace and safety of the entire community. Now, this one simple linguistic shift does way more than just solve a puzzle. It completely reframes the verse, not as some kind of sectarian command, but as a universal call for any community to protect itself. It's a principle that applies to literally everyone. So who are these deniers of security? Well, according to this reading, they aren't people from a different faith. They're terrorists who scare people. They're criminals and drug traffickers. They are any aggressor, anyone at all whose actions threaten the peace and safety of a community. The focus stays right where it belongs, on harmful behavior. And let's be honest,
This isn't some radical or strange idea. It's a universal principle. It's written into laws all over the globe. Every single community has a fundamental right to defend itself against people who threaten its peace and safety.
So let's just quickly recap how this works so perfectly. First, the big contradiction disappears. Second, that core principle of no compulsion in religion is totally protected and upheld. And third, the call to fight is no longer about religious aggression at all. It's about the legitimate, necessary defense of your community against actual, tangible harm. This whole way of reading things leaves us with a really powerful question, one that goes way beyond just this one verse. How might our world, our societies, our own lives change if we started to judge people not by the private beliefs they hold, but by the peace and security they bring to the world around them?